Become the party of default. The Republican Party has now become the party of default. The party that says America doesn't pay its debts.
Hey guys, Pedro over here. Now, in this video, I actually want to talk about how they're getting ready to collapse society. And I feel like it was already on that verge, but they had to do it in such a way that everyone won't get up and fight back. So they played it in these phases, these stages, and it's all here, folks. There's a lot of code going on, subliminal messages, and deeper meanings behind it all. So let's shine some light on this, shall we? Alright, so I first started noticing these stories about the ports in LA. There's many ships being left there. It almost seems they are deserting them in some aspects, as if everyone just disappeared. But there's a lot going on in the seas. We know that. We only get to see what they present to us and make it out from our speculation.
Well, officials say the delay is partly because there's a shortage of trucks and drivers to pick up the goods. All right, the economic logjam could continue until the end of 2022. The ports of LA and Long Beach handled 40% of the nation's imports. That's a lot.
Yeah, I was just in Long Beach. It was so full of these cargo ships just sitting here.
We are also hearing about these blackouts, a internet outage, possibly all being brought together.
Now to the state's effort to prevent the deadly widespread power outages back in February from happening again this coming winter or any time for that matter. Today, state lawmakers heard about a potential loophole that some of them worry will place Texans at risk again.
This is the Achilles heel right now. Right now. What we talked about with the Railroad Commission, it stops right here.
She is among the state senators who sounded the alarm about whether a proposed rule by the Texas Railroad Commission would place Texans in danger this winter. After the power outages that killed 210 people, state lawmakers passed bills that would require state agencies to put together a critical infrastructure list so that they wouldn't lose electricity during a winter or any other storm.
We see this headline about the bandwidth CEO confirming these outages due to DDoS attacks. And what they do is attack the networks, slow it down, or shut it down altogether by using your IP in these attacks.
It's days like today that most of us realize how reliant we are on the internet. Thousands of CenturyLink customers still without internet and phone services as one of the nation's largest internet providers continues to experience a massive nationwide outage.
It's a problem for so many. The company says it could be up to 24, maybe even 48 hours before it's fixed.
We see them talking about the depth and to prepare for possible shutdown and much more. They're getting ready for this collapse of society, and I believe they have the UN or another group of people who will come in and fully take over things. But they first have to separate those who obey and those who don't follow their system.
We were forced to take the shot or resign. That was our choice.
And what did you choose?
I chose to get the COVID shot because I need my job.
I'm not taking that vaccine. It's more like it's either a paycheck or my rights.
And New York State Governor Kathy Hochul says there are plans to bring in healthcare workers from other states, if not other countries, if there is any sort of staffing shortage. And she says she won't hesitate to issue an emergency order that would bring in help from the National Guard.
Ministers are working hard to prime the pumps. Military on standby, calls for restraint visas for foreign drivers. And today the business secretary mobilised 80 or so tankers the government holds in reserve, offering them to fuel companies to keep their drivers moving. But can he guarantee the run on fuel won't affect Christmas?
And we're very, very focused on making sure that we get enough drivers. We've stood up military drivers, and we want to just make sure that we get enough petrol into the forecourts.
At the moment, every delivery that comes in is either late, cancelled, or instead of getting 10 pallets, we'll get 2 pallets.
How long do you see this going on for?
I see it going on for months.
Now, it also says here, this could be the third shutdown in 3 years. Imagine that. The third shutdown in 3 years. So we have the 33, Freemasonry. What do you know? And that's a code meaning, subliminal message. They're sending codes and messages to prepare. Something is going on and people know it. This is why they're talking about this infrastructure bill, etc. But for the masses, they will not find out till it's too late.
Hysteria, like controversy in Washington, is usually a manufactured phenomenon. But when it comes to the increasingly vocal worry that Congress will not raise the debt ceiling, the hysteria is real and warranted. All of us and the global economy would be in for a world of hurt if Congress, Democrats and Republicans, fails to act.
So I wanted to quickly highlight this for you guys to be prepared for anything. And with that all being said, have faith.
Are you surprised that we, speaking of the Soviet Union and the United States, and speaking of game theory, are you surprised that we haven't destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons yet? Like that simple formulation of mutually assured destruction, that's a good example of an explanation that perhaps allows us to ask better questions, but it seems to have actually described the reality of why we haven't destroyed ourselves with these ultra-powerful weapons. Are you surprised? Do you think the game theoretic explanation is at all accurate there?
I think we will destroy each other with those weapons.
Eventually?
Eventually. Look, it's a very low probability event. So I'm not surprised it hasn't happened yet. I'm a little surprised it came as close as it did. You know, your general thinking, realizing it might have just been a flock of birds or it wasn't a first strike attack from the USA, we got very lucky on that one. But if you just keep on running the clock on a low probability event, it will happen. And it may not be USA and China, USA and Russia, whatever. You know, it could be the Saudis and Turkey.
And it might not be nuclear weapons, it might be some other destruction.
Bioweapons. But it simply will happen, is my view.
Human history has been full of battles and wars, some big and some small. But if World War III were to happen, it might be humanity's biggest battle yet. Advanced technology, massive troops, and more intensive strategy would all be involved. But why would something like this happen? What countries would join in? And how would this war be fought? This is What If, and here's what would happen if we had World War III. People have talked about a possible World War III for decades. It almost started in the 1960s during the Cold War between Russia and the United States, but thankfully we managed to avoid that. But let's say we aren't lucky enough to avoid it next time. When might World War III happen? Well, it's tough to say. A world war could start due to prominent political figures getting killed, intelligence threats, or fighting over valuable resources. Talking about it like this makes the chances of a war happening sound likely, but the chances are actually a lot lower than you think. Since 1945, the world has seen many different battles. Vietnam, Afghanistan, and dozens of different civil wars. We should keep in mind that in order for a world war to happen, it needs to involve the entire world. And the structure of the world has changed even more since 1945. Countries simply aren't as closely allied as they used to be. Militaries are even stronger and more skilled than they were. As in previous world wars, it's most likely that millions of people would die, and the Earth would take decades, if not centuries, to recover. Earth would take decades, if not centuries, to recover, especially with some of the weapons and tools countries would be using in today's age. Soldiers on the ground might have exoskeletons. These are metal frames around the soldier's body that augment their strength. Although this probably won't turn them into RoboCop, it would make it easier for soldiers to carry heavy equipment over long distances. Weapons that can bend around corners might also be a possibility. And instead of seeing the war fought in the sea or the sky, it could actually be fought in space. Militaries could fight over weaponized satellites that could affect what's below them. Although a lot of this stuff sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, we should keep in mind that these weapons are scary, and hopefully no one will ever need to use them. After all, things like this are meant to kill people. But there may not be many soldiers on the ground. The war of the future might be fought on computers. Drones, artificial intelligence, and robots could be the only things on the battlefield. There's also a chance that acts of war in the future might not involve any violence at all. Hacking into other countries' computers, as well as power grid shutdowns, are all a possibility. And what would this war be about, anyway? It could have to do with resources, specifically water. Since fresh water is such a scarce yet valuable resource, nations may begin to fight over it as it continues to deplete. Hopefully, World War III won't go on forever. So how could it end? Well, one reason, and a main reason why a world war hasn't happened yet, has to do with these things. During World War II, the United States dropped nuclear bombs on Japan, killing over 100,000 people. The cities involved took decades to recover, but the 2 nukes used in World War II would pale in comparison to the modern nukes we have today. Oh, and by the way, there are nearly 14,000 nuclear warheads around the world, held mostly by America, Russia, and China. A nation can have all the resources, people, and strategy they want, but if a nuke gets dropped on them, then it's game over. And if one country drops a nuke, what's to stop another country from doing the same? And then another, and soon the world would be destroyed. So who would win this war? Absolutely no one. A full-on World War III would have a massive impact on the world as a whole. It's safe to say that the world would never be the same. But try not to lose sleep over this. After all, a third world war like this, with dozens of countries involved, is incredibly unlikely to start tomorrow. If 2 countries get into a fight, it's more likely that other countries that aren't directly involved will stay that way and let the other nations fight for themselves. Wars are terrible. Let's try to avoid them. After a heavy subject like this, I need a bit more fun.